Ukrainian troops raise flag in central Pokrovsk, Donetsk region. German Chancellor denies any rift with Trump or EU leaders over peace plan talks. And how Trump team said to have discussed forming alliance with Russia and China as alternative to G7. The latest news next. The administration of US President Donald Trump is said to have discussed the idea of forming a new body of major powers, Core 5, which would include China and Russia, bringing traditional adversaries closer together and sharply contrasting with the existing G7, reported by Defense One. The idea reportedly appeared in a longer, unpublished version of the National Security Strategy, parts of which the White House released last week. According to Defense One, the strategy envisaged creating a new group of leading global power, C5, Core 5, the United States, China, Russia, India, and Japan. This was intended to be an informal club similar to the G7, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. However, membership in such a grouping was to be determined not by political system. G7 is a club of wealthy democracies, but solely by population size, over 100 million people, and economic potential. Like the G7, Core 5 would hold regular meetings to discuss global issues. The topic of the first C5 summit was expected to be the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia as the key step towards stabilizing the Middle East. However, officials from Trump's team denied the existence of alternative versions of the document. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz denied any disagreements during a telephone conversation with US President Donald Trump and EU leaders regarding the peace plan for Ukraine, Sky News reports. According to the agency, this morning, December 11th, German Chancellor Merz spoke in Berlin with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He told reporters that he expects talks with US officials this weekend on the peace plan proposed by the European side. This came after reports that Ukraine had officially submitted to Washington a 20-point plan, which Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called a fundamental document.
If we now proceed with this process as we envisage, there will be talks with the American government over the weekend.
German media reported minor disagreements between Merz, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Donald Trump, and French President Emmanuel Macron during a recent phone call, but the German Chancellor insisted that this was not the case. He called the talks very constructive and insisted that Europe would continue to support Ukraine. The European Union's new 20th package of sanctions may target Russia's nuclear, steel, oil, and fertilizer industries. Russia's shadow fleet will also be hit again, according to EU Observer. There is already a draft statement by EU countries at the summit calling on members of the bloc to take further coordinated action against so-called flag states. These are states that effectively allow any ship to fly their flag, which Russia has actively exploited. Previously, thanks to this, a large number of old oil tankers unfit for navigation worked in Russia's interests. Now the EU plans to take measures against these countries to force them to revoke their flag permits. Other targets of the new EU sanctions are Russia's steel, fertilizer, and nuclear industries. These categories have been partially or completely overlooked by the European Union in terms of imposing restrictions. EU ambassadors also agreed on changes to their 19th package of sanctions, which is already in force. The documents, which were made available to the agency, refer to the addition of 23 individuals and legal entities, including a US citizen, to the EU blacklist, as well as 42 oil tankers that are assisting the Russian regime's military efforts. European Union ambassadors continue to discuss a new package of sanctions against Russia. As part of its preparation, more than 40 tankers from the Shadow Fleet have already been added to the blacklist. The EU has almost completed the agreement on the 20th package of sanctions against Russia. It is expected that the package will be officially adopted in January 2026 after the New Year holidays. Ukrainian soldiers raised the national flag in the center of Pokrovsk, Donetsk region, according to the 7th Airborne Corps. In this way, the Ukrainian military refuted the fake statements of Russian propaganda about the alleged capture of the city. The world must see that despite the Kremlin's lies about the capture of the city, Ukraine is fighting, will continue to fight, and will not give up its territory to the occupiers, the caption to the video reads. Fighting in Pokrovsk. On Monday, December 8th, the 7th Corps of the Airborne Assault Forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reported that Ukrainian units had carried out a planned maneuver in the areas of Lysivka and Suhy Yar, located south of Myrnograd. According to the military, the units were moved to more advantageous defensive lines. This decision was made to save the lives of personnel. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, explained that Ukrainian forces had to retreat from positions located approximately 5 to 7 kilometers from Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. According to him, it was impossible to rotate troops in these areas, and the enemy regularly found ways to infiltrate the fortifications, so holding these positions any longer was pointless. In Russia, the Drogobush thermal power plant in the Smolensk region, which supplies chemical production important for Russia's defense industry, burned down at night, according to Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council Center for Strategic Communications.
The Russians' Drogobush thermal power plant burned down at night. It powers chemical production, which is super important for Russia's defense industry.
According to him, the Drogobush chemical plant produces ammonia, nitrates, and nitrogen fertilizers, which are basic components for the production of explosives, in particular ammonium nitrate and nitrate mixtures for military needs.
Without power supply from the thermal power plant, their production stops. It also provides a stable energy supply to defense enterprises in the Smolensk region.
Kovalenko also emphasizes that the region is home to industries that work for the Russian military-industrial complex, instrument manufacturing, metallurgical plants, and repair facilities. The thermal power plant partially supports the energy sector of this industrial zone. That's all for today. Thanks for watching this video. Support Ukraine, like and subscribe.